look of the lion or the eye of the tiger. It's all about survival in the web of the spider. No place for hiding. Got to keep trying. Got to keep riding like a rhino. Just wildin'. That's nature, science. Hear the footsteps of the giants.
I have a dream.
On August 28, 1963, Martin Luther King Jr. called for civil and economic rights for Black Americans, an end to racism in the United States. But 60 years after that iconic I Have a Dream speech, so much more still needs to be done.
I can't lie, I almost cried when I seen the video of Tyree Nichols.
The right to life should apply to all black men, whether on the street corners or in the classrooms or even in the workplace. You want any flights about my son?
For close to 4 years, Jimmy Hill has kept a weekly vigil outside the Fulton County Courthouse in Atlanta. In January 2019, his son, Jimmy Atchison, was shot and killed by a local police officer. His family has been fighting for justice ever since.
They got to the apartment, Jimmy ran into a neighbor's house and hid in the closet. One officer told him to come out of the closet. As he was coming out of the closet, he was shot in his face under his left eye.
Say his name.
The 21-year-old father of two was fleeing after being accused of stealing a cell phone. After years of family-led protests, a grand jury indicted the now-retired officer on murder charges. A first step toward justice, but still never enough to bring Jimmy back.
January 2020.
We had to fight through our sufferings and struggles, our heartbreaks and our pain. We had to fight obstacles and hurdles that a lot of families would have gave up. And like in this movement, a lot of families do give up.
So what needs to happen to stop this kind of police brutality?
We need to abolish qualified immunity. Not saying get rid of the police, but we need to abolish qualified immunity. They're hiding behind that because their first response is, I felt threatened for my life. At no point in this investigation did any officer say Jimmy had a weapon. So they knew that Jimmy never had a weapon.
This year marks the 60th anniversary of Martin Luther King Jr.'s I Have a Dream speech. In that speech, he talks about the horrors of police brutality. 60 years later, why is America still facing the problem today?
Because of the racism. Georgia is one of the top racist states there is. Nothing has changed here.
Atlanta has a police brutality problem. Georgia has a police brutality problem. America has a police brutality problem. His family has been fighting for justice ever since then. They've been successful in getting the officer indicted, but we're in the process of trying to make sure that that individual is convicted.
Gerald Griggs is a homegrown Atlanta attorney and the head of Georgia's NAACP. He's made it his life's work to fight social injustices, helping dozens of families like Jimmy's along the way.
Police violence, voter suppression, economic inequality are just some of the issues. But I think the most pressing one is to get the police to stop killing unarmed black people.
60 years after Martin Luther King's I Had a Dream speech, what's the situation like for Black Americans today? In many ways, things are still very unequal.
Yeah, it seems like we're in the middle of a backlash after the election of President Barack Obama and with the election of Donald Trump. There feels like there's a growth of white nationalism that is backlash against diversity. But in Atlanta, which has fought in both civil rights movements, the abolition movement, and of course the civil rights movement, we believe that we have what it takes to push forward and achieve diversity.
What do you think about grassroots activism, which was so prevalent in Dr. King's day? We saw the Black Lives Matter movement, of course, 10 years ago. Do you think that's the solution today?
Absolutely, and I think Dr. King will be pleasantly surprised with this new generation of activism, how they've embraced his belief system and continue to push forward to complete his dream.
There's nowhere to hide, nowhere to run. There's nowhere to hide, there's nowhere to run. bugging out and communicate.
Black Lives Matter was born in 2013 in reaction to police brutality. Mass protests reached a peak in 2020 after the death of George Floyd, one of the biggest movements in American history. Photographer Sheila Prebrite documented the rallies from the beginning.
This is an image that I took in Ferguson, and the community was marching to the Ferguson police station, and young people were at the forefront of it, like 3 years old, carrying a coffin, and they were going there to put the coffin there. He's a citizen too, but you see he has handcuffs in the bag and what do you call those?
A baton?
Yeah, a baton.
And he was not a police officer.
Right, and the young people are not afraid of the cops. They say, we're not going out like you did our elders.
The pictures that you took at the police protests are in your book, 1960 Now, where we also see a lot of parallel portraits of these elders along with some of the protesters of today. What parallels do you see between the civil rights movement of the 1960s and Black Lives Matter?
I see the generational trauma, number one. Number two, the parallels is that they are still fighting for their human rights, just like their elders were back in the day. It's like a perpetual war continue to go on in the United States.
And was there anything different, would you say, between the two movements then and now?
You know, back then they didn't have TVs, okay? And they were very much more connected in the community because it wasn't, you didn't have integration then, okay? With the young people now, their parallel and how they think is through social media, because a lot of the elders would get mad at them talking about they're not organizing, they're not doing this, but they are organizing through social media. That's what the difference is, and they don't have leaders.
Well, that was going to be my next question, because when you look at the civil rights movement, there were incredible leaders. Whereas with Black Lives Matter, it seems like there are no leaders. Why?
Because this is what they told me. They said they killed Martin Luther King. They killed Malcolm X, and they don't want to go out like that. It's about keeping them guessing of who the leaders are.
Black Americans are 3 times more likely to be killed by police than white ones. They're also 5 times more likely to be incarcerated in state prisons. That's a story Lorenzo Lewis knows far too well.
Born in jail to an incarcerated mother. My father was also incarcerated at the time that I was born. And a lot of family members faced incarceration, substance abuse. And so happily myself at the age of 17, being incarcerated really changed my life.
After 3 months in juvenile detention, a judge gave Lewis a second chance. He became a health aide, going on to create the Confess Project, helping people of color talk about mental health through their barbers.
Well, my aunt owned a beauty salon in Little Rock, Arkansas, and it was in the middle of the heart of the neighborhood. People came there not only to get their hair done or to face a grooming appointment, they also came there to just face things in life, talk about different things that was going on. So I saw barbers and stylists uplift people every day through conversation, and really was a game changer.
All right, let's go. So Sam, what's it like for you? How is a shave with the Confess Project different from just a regular shave?
There are conversations that take place that I feel comfortable having with my clients now because of the training with the Confess Project.
Like what?
Something just as simple as saying, hey, have you thought about seeing a therapist? We're not therapists, but we feel like it sometimes, just because of the trust that the client has with us.
Right, because I mean, I'm looking at Lorenzo right now. That razor is pretty close to your face. Yeah. Was that part of the reason of doing it in a barbershop, because of that relationship of trust?
Absolutely, yes. And for men, this is probably one of the most intimate times that 2 men are in the same space at this close proximity. So we really wanted to take advantage of that moment.
Why do you think that the whole topic of mental health is so taboo in the community?
Just a lot of it is the stigma of mental health and the shame associated with it. The work that we do allows you to really break through that because we're providing those resources, the best services around mental health in general.
Do you know if barbershops played a key role during the civil rights movement?
Oh, absolutely. Different things that happened in the civil rights era around, voting and, using barbershops for social change. Historically, even in the 60s, really has continued to give hope for the work that the Confess Project does and how we can continue their legacy.
You ready to go?
Atlanta's legacy as the cradle of the civil rights movement lives on in 17-year-old Sidney Keys as well. The boy who now has a Marvel superhero named after him is the brainchild behind the nationwide club, Books and Bros.
Representation is extremely important for young black boys, specifically for the fact that it's hard to see yourself as an astronaut if you've never seen anyone who looks like you as an astronaut before. And when you only see people who are doing negative things in your community, that's what you begin to emulate. You want to be able to see characters that you can relate to, that your dreams align with, that are doing amazing things. And that's exactly why representation and literacy is important.
In America, by the time they're 13, just 1 in 10 black boys can read proficiently, something Sidney hopes to change, 1 book at a time.
Do you think it's going to have a positive effect on black boys in schools? Have you already seen that effect?
Absolutely. We've already seen a positive effect in schools on black boys with their reading scores improving, their behavioral problems may have getting better.
Have any of the members of the book club ever said anything to you that really touched you, that made you feel like you're doing something great?
Absolutely. One of the members from a little bit ago, he ended up coming up to me. He was this little small guy. He's probably like 8 years old, but he was amazing. He comes up to me and hugs me around my waist and calls me his superhero. And that was the most heartwarming experience of my life, being able to see that I'm impacting these boys' lives as even just a positive role model. That's something that means a lot to me. So I was excited.
Martin Luther King Jr. made history as the defining leader of the civil rights movement. But even as his legacy of nonviolence continues to impact the world, the push for greater racial equality in America remains one of the country's biggest challenges today.
I'm Gulliver Cragg, France 24's correspondent in Kiev. I'm forever crisscrossing Ukraine, Poland and other countries in the region to keep you up to date with all the news from Central and Eastern Europe. Join me on Live from Paris and in all France 24's news and magazine programs.
Gulliver Cragg, one of the 200 France 24 correspondents around the world. The best of culture every day on France 24, with exclusive interviews with the most talked about people in entertainment. Encore's Eve Jackson and Olivia Salazar-Winspear bring you the latest from the world of art and entertainment. Our critics Marjorie Hash and Florence Villeminot speak to the biggest names in music. And Lisa Nesselson and Deeptika Laurent share the newest must-see films and TV series.
Join us every day for the latest from the world of arts and culture on Encore.